Today we went to Auschwitz and Auschwitz Birkenau. This place, it gives me chills. Auschwitz was a very big, very famous death camp because Hitler wanted to wipe out the Jews completely. He just wanted to murder them all. What do you think of that?
Oh, cut the tongue guard. Could you use a tissue?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's heavy, hey. The kids' shoes.
Oh.
All the kids' clothes and everything. So this is the first one. And then they built the second one. And so this became like the admin offices. And the one we're going to next is the massive, massive camp.
A few minutes drive away is the second camp, Auschwitz Birkenau. While the first camp was a large 40-acre, 400-metre wide complex, Birkenau is a vast, empty, barren, 422-acre compound, home to 90,000 prisoners.
So this is it. This is the main Auschwitz camp. And it is massive. Absolutely massive.
After the war, the Polish people needed timber and building supplies to rebuild their cities. So much of what wasn't destroyed by the Germans when they abandoned the camp was later torn down and reused. Where rows and rows of buildings once stood, now grassy open fields with just a few remaining buildings. Where Camp 1 looks like a quaint little suburban primary school, being at Birkenau feels like you're in the middle of a remote forest, hidden away from the world. And of course, cutting the camp into two, the railway tracks used to transport over 1 million prisoners to the camp. From the train platform, to the left was the smaller women's section, and to the right, the larger men's section.
The ones that weren't murdered were prisoners in Auschwitz. They had to sleep in these bunks in wooden barracks for the men and brick barracks for the women, but they were very, very cramped. They had 700 people in a building that's probably only twice the size of our house. 700 people sleeping on these 3-story bunk beds. They didn't have much food at all. They had to walk around in these very thin striped prison uniforms. They didn't have jackets. Some of them didn't have shoes.
The toilets were just sewer pits covered by a concrete lid with holes in it, and the sewage had to be emptied out by hand, or if they could find one, by using a spare food bowl. The prisoners with that job were called Scheitskommando.
Scheißkommando, shit commando, and they had to pull outfits outside by hands or by bowls they used to eat. He had to steal second bowl from a weaker prisoner. He stole his bowl, and then Egram had 2 bowls, one to eat and second to work.
All the buildings in the women's camp look like they're made of bricks, whereas the men's camp was wood.
Majority of women, especially women with children, with babies, went to the gas chambers immediately after arrival. But to the camp were brought also teenage girls, young women without children, mothers of teenage girls who looked quite strong, quite healthy. These women were set in camp, in female section, camp for women. Women work also from 10 to 11 hours a day in the same places like men, at fields, in factories, in warehouses. Women didn't have any privileges in the camp.
Not every child was murdered on arrival. Only the Jewish children met that fate. The non-Jewish children, the children of political prisoners, gypsy children, Polish children, lived alone in separate barracks.
This is the children's barracks. These beds. are so small, they would pile multiple children into them. These kids aren't with their parents, separated from them. These are the ones that weren't killed as soon as they got here.
There were around 232,000 children deported to Auschwitz. Around 216,000 were Jewish children, killed shortly after arrival. But around 20,000 lived at the camp as prisoners. When the camp was liberated, there were only 450 left under the age of 15.
Tell you what, this tour guide doesn't fuck around. He won't wait for you. I'm currently lost in Auschwitz. I was hanging back at the children's barracks, taking photos, and then Mum called me, kind of directing me where to go, but she said she's lost the grip as well. Like, you can't even describe how vast this place is. To think what it would have been like when all of the buildings were here. Crazy. Okay, I found them now. So, all is well in the world. Where I'm standing right now, if you can see behind me, this is called the platform. And that train track is how the trains used to come into Auschwitz. And would stop on this platform here, where the SS soldiers would separate them. Men on one side, women and children, and old people on the other. The old people, the women and children, unless the women were like strong and able-bodied, were sent straight to the gas chambers, and the men and the able-bodied women were then processed and lived in the camp. But this is where it all happened, right on this railway platform. We're coming up to the edge of it, and just to give you an idea of the vastness of what I'm talking about, I'm still not at the very edge of the camp. It's probably 100 meters or so to go. And that's just what it looks like from a solitary standpoint. Like, you know, you can't see kind of the depth of how it all looks. And it looks as though we're heading up to the remains of the crematorium, which the SS soldiers blew up as they knew that the Allies were approaching.
And entering the gas chamber, prisoners walk down this flight of steps to a long undressing room before entering the 50 by 7 metre gas chamber.
The old people and the women and the children, they were sent to the gas chambers where they were murdered. Now, to make sure that no one panicked and caused a big scene, they would trick them, and they told them they were just going to have a shower. So they would march them up to this big building, which you'll see in the video has been blown up. The German army blew it up before they left the camp because they tried to cover up what they were doing. So they were led into this big building, and they were told to take off their clothes and put their clothes on a hook. And they were excited about this. They were happy because they'd been in the train for days and days and hadn't had a shower, and they were finally here. They were going to have a nice hot shower, and they were going to have a sleep, because they didn't really understand what was happening. Why would they?
So then they were led into the gas chamber, like Crematorium 1 at Auschwitz 1, which was rebuilt after the war. Pellets of Zyklon B, a pesticide, were poured out of metal canisters through a hatch in the roof, and it slowly suffocated them. After 20 minutes, they were dead. And then other prisoners called Sonderkommandors were made to empty the gas chamber and burn the bodies in large crematorium ovens.
And then they would sprinkle their ashes in a river that flows behind Auschwitz.
Here the remains of the Canada warehouses, nicknamed Canada by the prisoners because it was the land of plenty, a group of buildings where the belongings taken from prisoners were held before being sold or donated to the German war effort. The prisoners working here were lucky. They had access to all sorts of contraband items like alcohol, which could be used to trade with other prisoners in the camp.
If a given mother worked in a warehouse called Canada, she could steal alcohol, cigarettes, underwear, because prisoners didn't have underwear. And in that case, she could bribe a couple, and then couple organized meetings between mothers and children.
The sauna was the name of the building where those who survived the selection process in gas chamber were taken to be processed as a new prisoner. Here they were forced to give up all personal belongings, shaved of all body hair, humiliated, disinfected, and given only one item, a thin striped prison uniform.
Here, in this place, prisoners ceased to be human and became numbers.
Women found to be pregnant were sent to the gas chambers, and from now on they were known only by the prisoner number tattooed on their arm. Naked prisoners were herded down this hallway to be disinfected and to take a shower, the only shower many would have for their entire stay in the camp. Usually without soap or a towel, and to torment them further, the water would either be ice cold or scalding hot. And near the remains of the gas chamber, a memorial dedicated to all who perished at the camp at the hands of the Nazis. On the 27th of January 1945, the Soviet army arrived at Auschwitz. Here they found just over 7,000 prisoners and 600 bodies. They also found 837,000 women's clothes, 370,000 men's suits, 44,000 pairs of shoes, and 7 tons of human hair. And these were just the items that hadn't been shipped out of the camp yet. The SS soldiers and around 56,000 prisoners had already been evacuated just days earlier, retreating into areas still controlled by German forces. But for the ones left behind by the Germans thought too weak to evacuate, after all the horrors that they had seen, after witnessing so many families be completely wiped out down to the very last baby, they were free.